North Koreans have assumed control. They're rounding up civilians outside. We found something buried in the rock. This discovery could change the future of the planet. The Koreans don't know what they're dealing with. Please.
Crysis is a game that is pretty easy to dismiss as being nothing more than eye candy, and yet Crysis is easily one of the greatest first-person shooters ever made. The game combines a large and often non-linear environment with great AI, a large assortment of tools with which to interact with the environment and the AI, and a ton of awesome set pieces, and of course, the best eye candy any game has so far managed. Crysis' story is pretty bottom of the barrel FPS stuff. Some archaeologists have found an alien artifact on a Pacific island and the Korean military has moved in to take control. The Americans respond in kind and a full-blown skirmish breaks out on the island. It's a fairly generic story and it isn't very well told, but the overall Koreans/aliens/tropical island scenario works extremely well, and to be fair, most shooters have stories and presentation just as mediocre as Crysis, so this is something FPS fans are more than used to by now. The thing that sets Crysis apart from all other FPS games out there, besides the astounding visuals, is the nanosuit. The nanosuit is essentially a $50 billion pair of overalls that lets you become super strong, move super fast, turn invisible, or have super armor. These four tools, combined with the openness of the environment and the versatility of the AI, turn Crysis into the ultimate sandbox. Strength lets you do things like leap onto tall buildings or up rock formations to take the high ground, but you can also punch and throw harder, which helps if you want to perform a melee kill or just throw a chicken into the sea. Speed helps moving around the island as it's a pretty big place, but it's also useful for quickly getting into or out of combat. While armor obviously just reduces how much damage you take, but it also increases your health regeneration, so it's a great tool to have during the firefights. The invisibility cloak practically turns the game from a pseudo-tactical run-and-gunner into a full-blown stealth game. You can use cloak to get into ambush positions, to escape combat, for exploration, or if you want to avoid fighting it entirely. This is a game where you can go through the first 2/3 of the game making only about 20 kills, because you can just skip straight past the enemies if you want to. But the greatest thing about the nanosuit is how well all its abilities work together. You may at one point turn invisible and run out into the sea to avoid a Korean checkpoint, swim around while still invisible and come out at a small shantytown, silently take out the guards patrolling a nearby building, use strength to leap up on top of it and scan the town for enemies, and then drop down inside and rig the building with explosives, then switch to speed and rush outside and all around the town, alerting the Koreans of your presence. Once they're onto you, you can lure them into your trapped building, fire up your cloak again and sneak outside while the AI is trying to figure out what's going on, and once you're a safe distance away, just blow the building up. But that's just one way you could tackle those enemies. You could also snipe them from range, use cloak to sneak in and execute the Koreans with your silenced pistol, charge in and engage them in a frontal firefight, find a vehicle and drive in, smashing into buildings and driving over the enemy soldiers, or just pass the camp by using cloak and speed, with the enemy never even knowing you were there. The AI responds well to the different playstyles you may adopt using your different tools. If you try to play the game as a stealther, the AI will respond as you'd expect. It explores when it sees and hears things, and this is particularly cool as it means you can distract the human AI or set up ambushes by luring the AI to a particular place. The human AI will also take cover, use grenades, advance with caution when he isn't sure where you are, and retreat when injured. The human AI also has a very impressive short-term memory. It stacks up things of interest and checks them all out. So if you're sneaking around in cloak mode and your suit runs out of juice and an AI spots you from a distance as you become visible, you can just lob a grenade as a distraction before clocking back up. The soldier will go and check out the explosion, but once he's satisfied that there's nothing there, he will come back and check out whatever it was that he first noticed. It's very satisfying to play against an AI that isn't harder because it's got more health or because your weapons do less damage, but because it's actually smarter. There's a large variety of weapons in Crysis, and most of them can be customised in interesting ways. You can attach a silencer which will obviously suppress the sound your shots make, but it also reduces their penetration effect, making your shots less effective at range. You can add a variety of different scopes, and to some weapons you can add attachments for secondary fire modes like a grenade launcher or tranquilizer darts that silently take your enemies down, but only temporarily knocks them out. Whether you like to snipe, stealth, or go run and gunning, or any combination of those three things, you'll find a variety of weapons and weapon customizations that cater to your style. One of the coolest things about the game is that there's a sort of duplicity in almost everything. While you're very alone in the game, you aren't a one-man army. You interact with the other members of your squad on a fairly regular basis, and it's established quite early in the game that your elite commando unit is attached to a full-blown armour, and the game does give you a sense that there is fighting elsewhere on the island, which is a great feeling. And while you are in a super suit, you aren't a super soldier. You die very easily if you try to go ramble on the enemies, so even though you are far more powerful than the enemies, you're constantly reminded that you are only human, and the only advantage you have over your enemies is a technological one. Very few games manage to convey this feeling to the player, the feeling that you're both very powerful and yet also very vulnerable at the same time. It's a pretty great feeling. While there's a large degree of freedom in the game, it's not a free roam game. The first thing to realise is that you're a soldier with a mission, and time is a factor. You aren't there to see the sights or explore, but the environment is pretty open at times and pretty linear at others. Sometimes you're travelling down a narrow rock corridor, sometimes you're in open fields or jungle environments. There's a variety and it feels realistic. If you've ever been to, or perhaps just looked at photos of a tropical island with large rock formations, you may find yourself thinking that Crysis has a pretty authentic environment. But it is a game, and it's a game with a linear, level-based structure, so there are always going to be concessions that have to be made. And just as the style of play is so focused on change and versatility, so is the game's overall design. The opening two-thirds of the game are set in the lush jungle environment, but you'll later find yourself in a zero-gravity environment which is unlike anything you will have played in a shooter. Your shell casing floats around in the air and you move almost as if you were swimming. The architecture here is just mind-blowing, and we get to see the aliens in their natural form. These aliens are unlike anything I think of when I think of other aliens in science fiction, which I think is a pretty impressive achievement in such a crowded genre. The gunplay here isn't quite as impressive, as the AI forces you to adopt a more generic run-and-gun approach, or float-and-gun approach, but the originality of the experience and the just sheer beauty of the environment far more than makes up for any shortcomings with the gunplay. After the zero-G stuff, you're back out into the jungle, but now it's been transformed into an icy jungle. Instead of fighting North Koreans here, you're fighting alien machines that resemble the squid robots from the Matrix. They aren't anywhere near as fun to fight as the humans, but that is more than offset by some of the most spectacular set pieces in the entire game. The final act is the shortest and the weakest. It takes place on an aircraft carrier, and a lot of it is just A to B stuff with little or no actual gunplay. The final showdown is suitably epic, but it's probably not the most fun you'll ever have with the game, and you'll probably be glad when it's over. You can't review Crysis without talking about the visuals, so here goes. Crysis is easily the best looking game ever made. Not only is it visually spectacular, its environments are so huge that pretty much nothing even comes close. In addition to that, Crysis conveys the beauty of the natural world in a way that no game has managed since Oblivion. While Half-Life 2 still has by far the best facial animations, Crysis's facial models are without equal. It really is just the best looking game you could play today. It obviously has pretty steep hardware requirements, but even at medium settings the game is beautiful. And of course, there's a lot more to Crysis than just its visuals. Even if the best you can manage is low settings, I'd recommend Crysis just as highly as if you were maxing the game out, because it's just so brilliant to play. In addition to the single player campaign that will last you anywhere from 7 to 15 hours depending on how you choose to play the game also features some great multiplayer and an extremely powerful and surprisingly easy to use editor. Within a matter of hours you can have mastered the basics of level design and start making your own playable levels, which can add countless hours onto the game's lifespan. In fact, just creating the environments is a game in itself. Crysis is a game that's pretty easy to misunderstand. It's extremely good looking, which almost seems to be to the game's detriment to some people. And because of the sandbox nature of the game, it's really only as good as you make it. But Crysis combines excellent gunplay mechanics with some awesome AI, beautiful and huge environments, a ton of exciting and cinematic set pieces, some genuinely revolutionary improvements to the formula, and some stunning visuals. And it's easily just one of the best first-person shooters you will ever play.